Living on the edge, researching, recording, marketing from lots of things, movies for all we can see.
Ah, ah.
We are on the rise and the listeners are here, hearing with no surprise, arriving neither here nor there. Steph and Anja, Steph and Anja's me review. Steph and Anja's me review. Steph and Anja.
I think that's our number one intro, to be honest.
I
I don't think
like
we
it.
can really keep that ever.
No, that's actually though. The Total Drama Island intro.
Okay, no, you're right.
That was a very good intro, but this one, yes, I think is number one.
This one, and the Revenge of the Sith one.
True. I feel like
Anyway.
we have a compilation of our intros. Anyways.
Oh my god, so true. Anyway, welcome to a new era of Steph and Anja's media review.
Yes.
Where we review literally anything.
Where it's mostly movies at the moment, but we do other stuff too, we promise.
Including TV shows. Like Spectacular Spiderman.
And we've done other ones like Supernatural.
That is true. I
can't think of the rest off the top of my head. But we need to take a pause because to our listeners on Spotify, we've done something new. Something quirky. Something different.
Something crazy.
So we've actually started filming our recordings and we're also posting them on YouTube.
Woohoo!
So, hi, if you're watching on YouTube. These are our faces. We've never revealed our faces before properly, so
yeah. Unless you follow us on, TikTok or Instagram.
That's
wink,
true.
wink,
but they don't always know which one's which, though. We've never said this is what Steph looks like and this is what Anja looks like.
So true. Okay. Anyway, so if you are new here, I'm Steph.
And I'm Anja.
just for clarity's sake. And today we are reviewing the Spectacular Spider-Man TV show, animated series.
It's going to be so good.
Which so keen for.
Yes. Also, just apologies for my camera. It's glitching. Just, I thought I'd
what do you mean? It's intentional, right?
It is. I'm just giving Spider-Man across the Spider-Verse vibes, okay?
Exactly.
With
this. That's how it ties
in. I'm just in theme.
Exactly. So I guess before we jump into Spectacular Spider-Man, I guess I wanted to ask what your background with this show was, because I have a background with it.
I have a
background
with it.
And I'm curious to
know. Yes. So I watched this growing up, I think on ABC3, if it was on ABC3. It was on ABC3 or Go. Those were my two channels I always watched, and I watched this show when I was a kid, always after school. Whenever it was on, I watched it with my brother. It was such a cool memory. It's so, I literally still talk to my brother to this day about this show. We will, chat what he feels about it, and it's just, that's where it's deep in the heart.
Yeah, no, I'm very much in the same boat. I watched this a lot as a kid, to such a degree that when I was doing my research, I was surprised that it was only 2 seasons. I think is how often I would go and watch it.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot more. But we will get into that. But no, I think this may have been one of my first exposures to Spider-Man as a character. I think because it was coming out at the same time as the Sam Raimi ones, and then obviously the Andrew Garfield ones were on their way. So it came at a good time for me.
Yeah, I think it came just after the third movie, I think. So it was major influence from there. So yeah. It was definitely I think my first introduction to Spider-Man was the Sam Raimi movies, but this one was my first more kid-friendly introduction to it. Yeah.
No, exactly. So I guess in terms of providing context, I feel like everyone kind of knows what Spider-Man is, right? We don't need to be oh, who is this random superhero? I feel like Spider-Man. Okay, go on.
It's a dude who got bit by a spider and now has spider powers.
Oh my god, what? That's crazy.
What, you didn't
Spoilers
know?
for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess, like, the key kind of point of difference for this, I mean, based on, like, what I found when I was researching, is kind of, like, the behind the scenes and what happened after the show was made, because it came at a really interesting time for Marvel entertainment as a whole. So, it actually, I mean, we'll get into it, but it actually initially was meant to have 5 seasons. They'd planned to have 5 seasons,
With
um,
movies. Sorry.
with movies. Yeah, no, exactly. So it was meant to be like a really, really big show, um, and it was gonna consist of 65 episodes.
Had so
However,
many arcs planned. Oh.
I know. However, it was cancelled before the third season could really begin production, um, which is actually, interestingly enough, that we brought up the Andrew Garfield ones. It was because Disney acquired, I guess, like Marvel Entertainment, like TV. So while they didn't have the rights to Spider Man as like the live action character at that point, they did get the rights to do it as like a TV show,
Yeah.
which, you look at what came after, which was Ultimate Spider Man, which was like, I think a lot, it was received in a less positive manner, I think, than Spectacular Spider Man.
Although it did run
Um,
much longer.
it did, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I will also say that, like, and this doesn't surprise me, this is from Wikipedia, but obviously Spectacular Spider-Man was, like, applauded, like, quite critically, because it was such a faithful portrayal of Peter Parker and I guess the core cast members.
Mm.
Um, and it was also really stylized, like, the animation, it is such an interesting and, like, cartoony style, but I feel like it makes so much sense for Spider-Man to look like that, is what
Yeah.
I found. It was really simple, really, like, almost kid-friendly in a way, but it dealt with, like, some really interesting themes, which I think is a really cool part of Spider-Man, like any Spider-Man adaptation, really.
Mm. I actually so the series ran from between March 8th, 2008 to
Mm,
March 18th, 2009, so not very long.
yeah.
And the show was targeted to both young and new viewers as well as older and more like a more sophisticated audience. So that's kind of
Mm,
why it gelled so well. And when I think about Spectacular Spider-Man, I really relate it to, I don't know if you've watched it, Teen Titans, the original Teen
yes.
Titans like animated show, and how that also had the same where it was targeting new and young audiences, but also was made for older audiences, were more sophisticated, and it had like deep storylines that meant something but could be edible, I guess, for both audiences.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think it's, an interesting reflection of, I guess, TV and, like, animated TV at the time, especially compared to now. I think we've talked about this like quite a lot on the podcast, but I think it's worth mentioning that, like, obviously, even with 2 seasons, like, this show left such an impact,
mm,
and it is because, like, upon rewatch, there is stuff to really enjoy and really gel with as an adult versus like when you're a kid. Um, I know for me, like, the characters are such an important part of anything that I watch. If I don't like the characters, like, I just can't get into it. And I think, like, all the characters, not just Peter Parker, but, like, his immediate friend group, the villains, like, literally all the characters are really well written,
yeah.
and I feel like you can understand, like, where they are coming from.
Mm. I actually have another little thing to say.
Mm,
So, Spectacular Spider-Man, uh, it was the seventh series to focus on the character after Spider-Man,
mm.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Spider-Man,
Yeah.
Spider-Man Unlimited, and Spider-Man the new animated series. I just thought
Oh
that
my
was
god.
funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe a bigger discussion on Spider-Man as a whole, especially when you look at, like, the live action adaptations,
Mm,
but I know that, like, when they moved from Andrew Garfield to when Disney acquired, like, some of the rights to live action Peter Parker Spider-Man, um, that was a big reason why they didn't go with like the origin story first, is because like even in live action,
so
it had
many
been done
times.
twice
Yeah.
in like the last 10 years, like from when that got made. And so I do understand that. But I think like of all the ones you listed, to be honest, I'm like, Spectacular Spider-Man is still number one for me.
Oh,
I'm just like,
100%. And those are
I feel
only
like that
ones,
is quintessential.
right? And these are the only ones prior to
Yeah,
Spectacular Spider-Man,
yeah,
not the ones after as well. But still, Spectacular Spider-Man is the one that sticks in the brain.
yeah, exactly,
And a
exactly.
little thing I just thought about as well,
Mm,
Miss Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm pretty sure in the intro, which we'll get into it later, but like the intro has the origin story in it. You know how
yeah,
like it always plays a song, and I think it actually shows Peter being bit by a spider. So you kind of, when kids are watching it, they see the origin, they understand what the
yeah,
character is, and they don't actually have to rehash it because they can just kind of gloss over it with that bit of imagery. And so
yeah.
like,
Like in saying that, in the first episode, it does start with Peter getting bit by the spider,
mm,
but obviously, like it's such a well-known thing,
story,
and
yeah,
potentially it's helped by this show specifically, like for people our age, where
yeah,
it's like because it's reiterated in the intro, you don't have to think about like, oh, how did Peter get to this point? Because like you just know. Peter
right,
Parker is such a well-established character. Spider-Man is arguably like the most famous superhero, I would think,
yeah,
outside of like Superman, Batman, and then you have Spider-Man.
mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, we can talk about the intro because I feel like that. I don't want to say it carries, but I think it's why like this series like often sticks in people's minds.
oh, such a good song. Just
Yeah,
it just hits different. Okay,
it does. It does.
like I gave her a good rendition with altered lyrics at the start of this
Yeah.
episode. But no, it's I don't know, the lyrics are just so good. They've just got the best like melody and it just like
Mm,
it
mm.
goes. I love it. I
Yeah.
can read the lyrics. I don't have to sing it for you guys. I don't want to turn you guys away any more than I already have. So it goes, living on the edge, fighting crime, spinning webs, swinging from the high sledge, he can leap above our heads. Villains on the rise and the city's victimized, looking up with no surprise, arriving in the speed of time. Now that's the verses they use in the intro, but the actual song has 5 verses in it. There's actually
Yeah.
more. I did not note down the other verses because it was too long, but it's cool
Yeah.
that there's an extended version.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's just like it's such a memorable song as well, like the instrumental. I know that like we're not reviewing the intro song like on its
No.
own, but I think as part of the context of like the bigger show, I think your music has to be really good in
mm.
order for it to really last. I know it wasn't really like a consideration at the time, like obviously 2008, 2009. Internet wasn't as big, like attention wasn't as you know, people's attention spans weren't that limited, to be honest.
True, but
Um,
TikTok wasn't around then.
TikTok didn't exist. What a
not,
time.
not even Vine existed.
Yeah, YouTube barely existed. But I just think like, especially now, that music has to be so memorable because like that is a core part of any story is the music. Um, I also want to talk like kind of about the series as a whole because I think it's really cool that apparently like the theme of the series is like the education of Peter Parker. So each of the
mm.
show's arcs is named after like a method of study. So season 1 is like biology, economics, chemistry and psychology, and then season 2 is engineering, human development, criminology and drama. And I'm like, that is so neat because, like, obviously Peter Parker is a high schooler in this show. Um, I mean, he is in like a lot of adaptations,
Mm.
but I think it's really cool that they kind of thought about that as they were putting the show together, even though it didn't get the 5 seasons that they were actually after. Um, I think they did really well with what they had.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest. Um, and I just think it's really neat that they were like, oh, each of his arcs are going to be a method of study in high school.
Yeah. And
I
it's
love that. I'm
it's
obsessed with that.
yeah, and it's actually cool what they tackled in the show as well. They did like
Mm,
typical teenage coming of age like
mm,
issues, but like such as like popularity, financial difficulties, multitasking, securing employment, and then they also delved later into metaphors of drug use and gambling. So like they
yeah,
tackled some big stuff too, and they've done it
yeah,
so well.
yeah, exactly. Like, oh, Spectacular Spider-Man. I am obsessed. I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with it. Um, but I guess we're talking about the series as a whole, but there's like a lot of characters in this. Did you have a favorite character as a kid, and did that change now? Has that changed since?
Okay. I feel like I liked Gwen when I was younger.
Mm,
But about it kind of being scarred by Gwen, not this Gwen, but by another Gwen, who
yeah.
unfortunately fell and did not survive the fall.
Oh, R.I.P.
That
Queen.
actually scarred me for like life. I like can't watch like it like stuff with Gwen in it because it just like
Mm,
hurts. But I did love Gwen in the show, but I think like Peter's my favorite now. I can't help
yeah,
it. But haven't you?
yeah. I I mean, I would agree. I think I always really liked Peter as a kid because I was always someone who was like, no matter what, I always root for the hero. And I think Peter is a very likable hero and a very relatable one. So I
Mm.
like love that for him. But I think like Norman Osborn, to be honest, I also quite I almost appreciate more as like a villain because like I just think it's such an interesting dynamic between him and Harry and then him and Peter. It's like it's not really something that's addressed, I think, in like any of like the live action movies outside of the original like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And I think it's done differently in the show where it's like I don't know, it feels like they're actually in high school, whereas I think in the live action ones, simply because the actors were a little bit older, it did
Yeah.
not hit in the same way.
It's so true. Actually, looking at Norman Osborn because you made me think about it. Because when you think Norman Osborn, I think Willem Dafoe, obviously, like
Yeah, yeah.
same movie. And then like watching Spectacular Spider-Man, he's just like this redhead with freckles. I'm just like, who is this
Yeah, I know.
guy?
Who is
He
he?
doesn't look
But I think
evil enough.
yeah, I think that's Norman Osborn, but I think the Green Goblin, like, character is, like I feel like that's what I kind of go between, like, him and, like, that version of the character and the Sam Raimi one.
Yeah,
Because I just think, like, the silhouette, like, from an art style point of view, it's, like, awesome, like, it's so exciting and
yeah,
very dynamic. I love animation. I love that, like, they can just do so much.
yeah.
People should make animated shows more often
They
and
should.
not make them live action.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I actually have a fun fact about Gwen
Hmm,
Stacy, by the way, in Spectacular
hmm.
Spider-Man. This is like the first iteration where she's like a series regular.
Yes.
It's normally
Yeah.
MJ. MJ's always the focus of the love
Yeah.
interest. And in this one, they're like, actually, she's Gwen. Let's give Gwen some more airtime, you know? And
Yeah. Yeah.
like, I think that might have influenced Amazing Spider-Man a bit because of
Yeah.
the
Totally.
popularity of Gwen in, how this show worked out in
No,
a weird way.
I would totally agree with that because I feel like I remember thinking that they were very similar in terms of how they were characterized. And
Mm,
obviously, like, a lot of that is drawn from the comics to begin with. But I was like, comparing to, obviously you have Gwen in Spider-Man 3, and it's like, oh, like, it felt very different to watch that and then to watch Spectacular Spider-Man and then also watch Amazing Spider-Man.
yeah.
Like, it's very interesting to me.
Mm. It's actually interesting to bring up the comic books because like Spectacular Spider-Man was so comic book accurate
Mm,
compared to
mm,
like other iterations. And then my brother actually told me that like Spectacular Spider-Man used like they refined their characters from the 90s show. Like that's where a lot of inspiration was drawn from,
Okay, yeah.
as well as the Sam Raimi live action. And I thought that was like really cool because then you're like, does it live up to the potential? And like it sure did. Like I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool fun fact.
Yeah, and I guess, like, as part of that, I think it's very interesting to think about, like, the timeline within the universe where it's like a lot of the characters aren't quite where you would think they would be. I think, like, obviously Harry Osborn is kind of like the main one. That cliffhanger, oof. What was gonna happen with that? We will never know. Um, but I like how I'm looking at the wiki, and I like how they've kind of phrased this, where they're like, it's not that they're depicted as direct equivalents to the comic counterparts, but rather as characters that will eventually get to those points. And I'm like, oh my god. I think that, especially when you're kind of dealing with a bit of an origin story or like just post origin story, I think you need to have the room to develop your characters to get them to a certain point. You can't have them start off at that point and then be like, oh my god, where do we go from here?
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I have another fun fact.
Go for it.
So, again, this is from conversations with my brother. Go give him a massive shout out. But he did kind of say that Peter's kind of grown to have no backbone as of recently.
Mm-hmm.
It was phrased with some more colourful words, but I brought it back. But the Peter in Spectacular Spider-Man has angst. He shows his anger. He shows his bravery. He shows his courage. Like lots of things, like lots of traits that the more current versions of Spider-Man we see don't have. So like it's really cool that Spectacular Spider-Man had so much room to just not room, but I've lost my words. But
no, I get it. Room to, I guess, develop and like express himself almost.
Yeah, like they gave him the potential to do that.
Yeah. And I actually wonder how much of that, because I'm thinking like Tom Holland Spider-Man. I love Tom Holland and I love that iteration of Spider-Man, but that has been basically the same plot line for him in each of his movies.
And I feel like the character hasn't grown like
exactly
that much. Like,
well,
like he's grown, but like not in the ways
but
we
like
want
when
to
you
see him go.
compare it to Spectacular Spider-Man as well, I actually have to wonder how much of that is like the limitations of like Marvel as a cinematic universe. Where Spectacular Spider-Man, maybe there were plans to involve the Avengers at some point, but it's ultimately self-contained.
Yeah.
It's Spider-Man's villains. It's dealing with Spider-Man, Peter Parker's friends. Like, it centers around Peter, and I think that's why they're able to give him a bit more, I guess, space to play and like
and more
feel like an actual
characterization.
person. Yeah. Because even with No Way Home, like that was a big cast of characters. And I know we had 3 iterations of Peter Parker in that, but like they were very different iterations, and I think it's very clear that like Tom Holland's is not quite, I mean, it's not quite there yet.
To be fair, Tom Holland's is more based on Miles Morales than it is Peter Parker to begin with.
That is true. That is true. And
like,
it's a big conversation.
Yeah, it's a whole other conversation, but like it's so hard to like see like these Peters and they're like not the same as like the Peters we grew up with and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, that is something I really liked about Peter Parker in this series. Like it's something I've always really liked is just like he feels like a person. He feels like he has very normal reactions to things and like I don't know, he doesn't feel out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah. Now, should we talk about the cast for a second?
Yes.
Because our boy who voices Spider-Man, his name is Josh Keaton. You might have heard his name across the board because he's done so much like animated superhero shows. It's actually ridiculous. But some of the things he's been on: Voltron, Green Lantern animated series, Lego
Oh my
Marvel
god.
Spider-Man, Hercules, like dudes across the board. But something that I found really interesting, right? That I found
Yeah.
was on Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Uh, Josh Keaton had some lines.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
as Spider-Man, but after the merger with like Disney and Marvel and the
Mhm.
whole cancellation and all that, they actually dubbed his lines over with Drake Bell because Drake Bell was
Yeah.
taking over as Spider-Man. Um,
Yeah. He
and
played
he
him
was
in Ultimate Spider-Man, which is the Disney series
mm.
that they put out.
But here's the kicker. So then Earth's Mightiest Heroes was actually cancelled after that anyways because of the merger. So dubbing Josh's voice over literally did nothing.
Yeah. There was no reason to do that.
What was the reason? But yeah, thought that was a little interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I also want to call out um, the man who plays Harry Osborn is James Arnold Taylor, who I know most regularly as the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So
True.
think about that.
That's so exciting. um,
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting like voice cast. I mean, obviously there's not really shows like this on air. I feel. I mean, I wouldn't know. I don't consume children's media really. But
yeah,
my
true.
understanding is like there's not really like this genre of show almost where it's like I don't know, like 13 episodes a season with like really long story arcs planned out. I feel like TV shows are like 8 episodes, maybe 2 seasons max.
No,
And
it's actually so
that's
bad.
it.
It's so
Yeah,
bad.
it's bad. But I also want to say like the the main cast are all like established voice actors
Yeah.
because I feel like in anything animated nowadays, it has to have at least one like A-list famous celebrity in the
Mm,
cast for it to even like get put out essentially, which again, maybe that's a bigger discussion we can have separately when it's a bit more relevant. But like I think it's interesting to point out that like a lot of these are just I don't want to say they're just voice actors, but they're doing the job that they signed up for. I cannot
yeah.
say the same for like live action actors.
Yeah. I see where you're coming from, but I agree.
Um, so I actually wanted to have a quick discussion about some of the production issues,
Ooh.
which we've kind of alluded to a little bit. Obviously, as we said, they wanted to do 5 seasons, which consisted of 65 episodes. Um, they only got 26 episodes, which was spread across 2 seasons, which it's very clear that they were not prepared for because there are a lot of loose ends at the end of season 2
Mm,
that were very much like setting up for a season 3 that they just never got. Um, which is basically, yeah, as we've said, like in September of 2009, the TV rights of Spider-Man were returned to Marvel. So, as we said, that does not include like the movie rights. It was just the TV rights. Um, and they basically like ummed and ahed about Spectacular Spider-Man for a while because in 2010, like the president of Marvel Animation was like, we haven't really made a decision either way. Um, but then it got it got cancelled, obviously. So devastated.
yeah.
Um, on the same day that like they reported that the cancellation had occurred, which was in I think April 2010, they announced Ultimate Spider-Man, um, and allegedly like the producer of Spectacular basically said like I haven't heard anything from Marvel, but yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man is basically taking place of Spectacular. So that would have been really upsetting. I would guess, and
Yeah.
apparently, in exchange for concessions on the movie rights, because Sony obviously wants to keep those, it's pretty well established. Um, Sony just gave up the rights to produce TV works, um, but they still retained ownership of Spectacular Spider-Man, so it left it in a bit of a limbo because like
Mm,
it wasn't something Disney could pick up, is my understanding. but like it also doesn't sound like they would have wanted to.
Missed
So
opportunity.
yeah, I agree.
They had
Um,
so much.
yeah, and it's even got like a lot of future plot details have been discussed over the years. There would have been like a planned cure for Electro. There was going to be like a DVD spring break movie. They would have included like a lot more villains. So I think there was Scorpion, Hobgoblin, Morbius. Shout out to Jared Leto.
Oh.
um, but yeah, they had like a lot of things planned. Um, Kind of including like the X-Men as well. The X-Men Avengers, they were gonna try and like get those characters in somehow. Is like what the producer wanted to do with the
Yes.
series. Um, they were gonna have like a musical themed episode. Um,
Mm-mm.
I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, absolute no.
Yeah, maybe it's for the best that we didn't get that. Um, and this is producer. I think his name is Greg Wiseman.
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Yes.
But he also wanted to put together like a sequel series as well of like basically, honestly, it's kind of like Into the Spider Verse where it's like Peter is all grown up, he's married to or engaged to Mary Jane, um,
Oh.
like just like an older Peter Parker. Um, and then yeah, obviously we've mentioned the occurrence with Josh Keaton in Avengers: Earth Mightiest Heroes.
Yes.
Um, Devastating. Um, but apparently, before like the first episode that he was meant to be in aired, they there was a creation of the Keep Spectacular Spider-Man Alive Facebook page, because it basically had come out that Josh Keaton was going to be reprising the role in some capacity. And it actually like got quite big to such a degree that like Josh Keaton addressed it. Greg Wiseman has addressed it. But also he was like, oh no, Spectacular Spider-Man is in a very different universe than Earth's Mightiest Heroes. So I guess in universe it wouldn't have mattered too much. There was also the hashtag Save Spectacular Spider-Man movement, which kind of ties into that Keep Spectacular Spider-Man Alive. But that was in 2020, 2021.
Yeah, it was quite recent.
It was very, very recent, like, especially when you think about it. It was 2 seasons released, 2008, 2009, which I feel like really shows just, like, how beloved the series is.
Yeah. It got 23,000 signatures.
Yeah.
It had a
That's
lot of people
crazy.
wanting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh Keaton, like, even responded in character.
On Twitter, I think it was.
On Twitter, yeah.
Yeah.
And then that kind of covers off like the production issues and kind of like bringing us to the most recent sighting of Spectacular Spider-Man,
Yeah.
which is in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
So, I mean, feel free to chime in, but I remember when Into the Spider-Verse came out, there was a lot of chit-chat about whether Spectacular Spider-Man Peter Parker would be involved because, like, it would have been interesting. It's a very stylistic animation style that would have kind of fit in well with the concept of the movie. And obviously, it didn't happen in that one, but he did have a cameo in Across the Spider-Verse.
Yes. Not
Oh my
to
god!
everyone's liking.
Okay, yeah.
Because even I think Greg Wiseman commented on this and he said that his Peter Parker, his Spectacular Spider-Man, wouldn't have been part of the Spider-Mans. He would have seen it
He
as
would not
well.
have been with Miguel O'Hara. He would have sided with Miles Morales.
Yeah.
I
So I
think
thought
is
that was I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But overall, like, it seems like fans reacted mostly positive, um, to the cameo.
Mm.
And, like, the showrunner, whose name is Victor Cook, seemed, like, pretty happy that the show was included and, like, acknowledged, by Sony and, like, obviously by Marvel fans as a whole. I feel like unless you saw it as it was airing, it could have been missed, to be honest. It could have very easily died, and I think it's a real testament that, I guess, to the show itself and to its fan base that it hasn't, you know, gone into the abyss,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Well, I have a few more marketing things that we haven't touched on yet,
Mhm.
but they're not really like marketing, because
Yeah,
there isn't that much marketing for this show that I could find on the
yeah.
interwebs. Um, Besides like how we obviously got marketed to, it was on our TVs, we watched it. Maybe
Mm,
there was an
mm.
ad. Like there
It
wasn't
was on
much.
ABC. You just turn on the TV and it was there.
Yeah, and there might be like, oh, it's school holidays, we'll do a spectacular Spider-Man marathon. There
Mm,
wasn't
mm,
much. But there was a few things that happened, and even interestingly, after it ended, um, in terms of toys. So
yes, yeah.
Hasbro had a toy line, and it was in 2008, and they had action figures. And then McDonald's had their Happy Meal toys in February 2009. Then in February 2010, a year after the show like ended, like the last season was a year ago,
Mm,
no news on the next season, Burger King still had their kids meals toy range. So I thought that was really cool. And then
yeah, yeah,
also there is Spectacular Spider-Man comics as well. So like I guess that also relates back to the show.
yeah. In terms of branding, it's like, you think about it, if people are searching for the comics, like, the animated series is still gonna come up, um, just simply because of the naming convention.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so, yeah, I definitely agree, like, I think that's played a bit of a part. Um, I also think that, like, some of the, like, the physical media, like the home release, was quite interesting, because they basically edited or wanted to edit the first 3 to 4 episode arc, into, like, a feature-length home release. Um,
Mm.
but obviously they didn't end up going ahead with that. They just released it as the series. Um, but I also wanted to say that when the second Amazing Spider-Man 2 released, God, I could not even tell you when that was.
No.
2014, I think. So like a few years after the series had wrapped up, they actually released the complete series on Blu-ray to coincide with this theatrical release. So
Mm.
again, Spider-Man as a brand is like really, really strong. Obviously, everyone knows it, knows the character, knows the villains.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess it's kind of like keeping certain parts of the brand, like Spectacular Spider-Man, alive by doing things that coincide like when people are most interested.
Yeah.
Um, and then in terms of streaming, it was available initially on Netflix, but obviously when all of that moved to Disney Plus, it got shifted there too. Um,
But it's not there
so
now.
it is not there now. It is back
In
in the
limbo.
abyss.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
maybe on binge, but I don't have that, so I watched YouTube.
Oh yeah. I don't have that. So I mean, it's fine, but yeah,
I think that
love
wraps.
Spectacular Spider-Man.
Oh, so good. But I think that wraps us up for like the main part of this episode.
Mm.
Okay, it's time. So for our new listeners out there or watchers, because we're on YouTube now, we are now going to move on to our favorite segment. It's something a little quirky, something a little fun. It's fan fiction, and we actually get to do the jazz hands stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like I always like when we were recording with that video, I always did
Mm.
jazz hands.
And then, yeah, we never saw it.
We never saw it, but now you can see our jazz hands. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a little
So
circle
yes,
moment.
for those For those who are unaware, basically every week, if applicable, one of us will bring a fan fiction to the table. Um, Generally, we try and keep it to good fanfics because we want it to be enjoyable to read, mostly.
Yes.
Um, so today I have brought a fic. What I found, actually, as a side note, is that a lot of spectacular Spider-Man fics are very, very long. You guys, fanfiction writers in this fandom, they have to make content somehow.
Yeah.
And they're keeping the fandom alive, I believe. Um,
Mm.
so today we will kind of go through the first chapter. It's not super long, but it is called the Sinister Six, but it's the found family trope.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is an orphaned fic, R.I.P. Um, bless up. And it sounds like it's a bit of a mix between Spectacular Spider-Man and the Tom Holland movies, which I found quite interesting.
Mm.
Um, I'll start by kind of reading off like maybe some of the additional tags because I think they give you a very good idea of what's happening, and then I'll read off the summary and kind of explain what's happening. So the additional tags are Sinister Six is a family because I said so. The villains help Peter out, identity reveal. Dr. Octopus reveals Spider-Man's identity and then immediately regrets it. Quote, who the hell let this child become a superhero? End quote. Otto, quote, me, end quote, Tony. Otto then beats Tony up. Found family trope, my beloved. Oh, I didn't read this one. No beta, we die like Uncle Ben. Unforgivable, first of all. Sorry, guys, no Iron Dad and Spider Son in this fic, only Tony getting beaten up.
Me
Eventual
respect.
happy ending, featuring my shitty chapter titles. Mysterio is a minor character, but God, I love him. This was written in 2022, by the way, so post No Way Home and obviously post Homecoming. What was the other one? Far
Homecoming,
Out.
No Way
Homecoming.
Home. We're missing one.
We're missing one. It's got home in it.
Is Homecoming the first one?
Yeah.
Homecoming,
Homecoming.
and then Away from Home, and then No Way
Yes.
Home.
Yeah,
Away
yeah,
from Home.
because they're in Europe.
You know how
Yes.
I remember? It's because I remember watching an interview where Tom Holland was like, I filmed Homecoming and I was away from my home, and then I filmed Away from Home and I was like 10 minutes away from my home.
Yes.
That's how I remember
So true.
it.
So the summary is as follows. Quote, hey kid, ever been to Germany? End quote. Dr. Octopus froze as he finally got a look at the person under Spider-Man's mask, staring at Peter Parker with wide eyes, jaw dropped. Peter squirmed in his grip, but he went still when he saw the doctor's face. Doc? Quote, you're a child. I've been fighting a child. End quote. Or, sure, Dr. Octopus and the rest of the Sinister Six might be supervillains, but they've still got a few morals left. Turns out, not everyone agrees. I have only read the first chapter of this fic, and I am all in. Because basically, what happens in the summary happens, and then Dr. Octopus is immediately like, put it back, put the mask back on.
Let's go back in time.
Yeah. But I think it kind of ties into No Way Home because he's basically like trying to figure out a way that causes everyone to forget what they saw. Basically, like forget who Peter Parker is.
Mm.
I'm like, interesting that like that's the plot device that we're using. I also like this fic because like it portrays Peter as like very much a 14-year-old who thinks that they are a bit more than 14.
Mm.
I love that for him.
Yeah.
I have to say, I also appreciate some of the Iron Man slander. No hate, but I do personally, I've always thought it was a bit irresponsible to bring a 14-year-old without really telling anyone where they were going to Germany to fight Captain America. I just thought it was a little weird in
It does
Civil
do a
War.
bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also, I'm not
thank you.
surprised. It's Tony Stark.
I mean, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
not wrong. Bless up. But yeah, basically, like the first chapter is like the Sinister Six basically looking at each other and being like, "What, what on earth do we do? Because we've all seen it. Can we really stop fighting now? You know, Peter doesn't really understand the world, or they think that Peter doesn't really understand the world. Um, and knowing that like people just aren't either good or bad. Obviously, humans are human.
Mm.
They're gonna kind of go both ways. Um, and yeah, it kind of ends on Doc Ock being like, "I believe your identity. Revealing your identity was a mistake. If there's a way I can fix it, then I will." Um, and I think that sets up Peter and Doc Ock's relationship, even though they, you know, then it's not like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man where they have that relationship. But I like that it's taking the extra steps to establish it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Actually, like, going back to Spider-Man being 14 and like not knowing the world yet, or knowing the world, it just made
Mm.
me think. I'm like, when he's 14, he would so see it as like black and white, and then becoming
Yeah,
an adult, it would all turn to grey. And I just kind of
yeah,
like that
yeah,
thought. It's such like,
yes,
imagine reading a fic where they really dive into like his whole morals changing because he's
yeah,
getting older and
truly.
realizing not everything is as black and white as it seems.
Exactly, exactly. Like, I feel like that's why I like Peter B. Parker from Into the Spider-Verse, like Spider-Verse series, because I'm like, I appreciate any story where it's like I was a child hero and now I understand the world a bit better, and I'm still gonna be a hero, but I understand things more.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
But I think that wraps us up.
Mhm.
Please go check out that fanfiction. Again, it's orphaned, so we got no one to credit, but
Sorry, love your work, whoever you are.
we like it. But yeah, thank you for tuning in to our first ever videoed episode of our podcast. It's very exciting. So if you're listening on Spotify, shout out you guys, and if you're listening and watching on YouTube, well, hello, welcome. Uh,
Welcome.
yeah, if you guys could give us a like on YouTube and a subscribe, or on
Yeah,
Spotify, if you could give us a rating and follow us, that would be really, really great. It would help us out. And check out below, there's a Q&A section on Spotify, and there's the comments below on YouTube. Give us some feedback or give us a recommendation. Next week's episode is a recommendation, so
yeah.
yeah, give us your thoughts, I
Yeah.
guess.
You know what? It doesn't even have to be about the episode. You can
No.
just say, like, how your day's going, what you ate for breakfast. We appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah. If you have thoughts, you can just write them.
Share 'em. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't want people to see it, write it on Spotify because it's private
Mm.
unless we choose to share it, which we haven't shared
Yes.
any of the comments that we've gotten for privacy.
No.
So,
Yes.
yes. We also have an Instagram and TikTok, which is linked on our YouTube video. It will be linked. And if you are listening on Spotify, it's Steph and Anja's movie review, all one word. Find us on TikTok, find us on Instagram. We have those. Do we use them?
Jury's still out, honestly. Who knows? There
Look,
is content on there, as far as I can tell.
I believe it's funny. There is funny
Yeah.
content on there. It's just not
And who
relevant
knows?
or new.
There may be more coming soon,
True.
potentially.
We always post in our story though, okay? There's
Mm.
always a story
Mm.
post when there's a
Yeah.
upload, but
Yes. If you
yeah,
don't want to follow us on Spotify, follow us on Instagram.
exactly. But yeah, I think that wraps us up.
Yeah. If nothing else, outro.